We're talking today with Craig VanHout of Columbia, South Carolina, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Now, Craig, can you start us off with some background on yourself, and to begin with, where and when were you born?
I was born in Green Bay, Wisconsin, September 24th, 1949.
Okay. Did you grow up in Green Bay?
I grew up in Green Bay.
Okay. And what did your family do for a living?
My dad was worked for the post office. Started out as a postal clerk and eventually became a personnel manager at the post office at Green Bay, and then he ran one of the substations, and when he retired he was a postmaster in Manitowoc, Wisconsin.
Okay. And where did you go to high school?
I went to Premontre High School in Green Bay, all boys Catholic high school.
Okay. And then what did you do when you got out?
I graduated, went to the University of Wisconsin at Oshkosh.
Okay.
Lasted there for a year and a half. Majored more in Budweiser and girls than I did in academics, and they asked me to leave after 3 semesters, and the draft board got me.
Oh, man, Uncle Sam caught up with you. So when did you get your draft notice?
See, I flunked out of school in January of '69. I got called down to get my physical for the draft I think by the end of February.
Mm-hmm.
And see, my grandfather passed away. So I went in, I got drafted or was inducted on July 9th, or July 10th of '69. So it was probably in May, end of May, first part of June.
All right. Now, were you expecting that you'd get drafted once you left school?
Yeah. I was hoping to get through a semester and be able to get into another college, but the draft board seemed to have this mindset that if you were going to college, if you're a young male going to college, the only reason you were going to college was to avoid the draft. And if you flunked out of school, they got you before you could get back in.
You were fair game at that point. At the point when you got drafted, how much did you know about what was going on over in Vietnam?
A fair amount. Our family always kept up on the news and whatnot, and even as a youngster, I was encouraged to read the newspaper, and we kept up and watched the news every night on TV, and got Time magazine, and kept up with all that. So it's pretty familiar. And I had the high school I went to had a junior ROTC program, and I was in that program for 3 years, and so there's somewhat familiar because back then the junior high school cadre were active duty personnel, and the major that was the commandant of the ROTC outfit there, he would have to go out with the death notices, and he would get a phone call in the middle of class, and he'd come back kind of ashen-faced, and he said, "I gotta go visit a family this afternoon," and he just absolutely dreaded going and telling that their family that somebody's son had just been killed in Vietnam.
So what were you thinking now? You've been drafted, you're reporting. You're just ready to deal with this? Or
yeah, it was like, oh crap, because I didn't want to do it. But basically, like everybody else, I had 3 options: go in the Army, go to Canada, or go to jail. And going in the Army was the most palatable of the 3. And so went ahead and did my thing, took my chances.
Now, when you did the physical and that kind of thing, were there guys going in there who were trying to find ways to beat the system?
Oh, sure.
What sort of stuff would they do?
I don't remember specifically, people do things to take something to get their blood pressure jacked up or whatnot, but if there was some unusual physical anomaly going on while you're getting your physical, and they suspected that you were doing that, they would get you a room at the local YMCA, and you would spend a couple nights there and come back and do it all over again once they had, put a couple of guards outside your door, and then they would come back, and when they had you in custody for a while and knew what you were ingesting, and guys tried, but I remember it was almost like the guys doing the physical, had been there, heard that all. Because I took my, when it's time for my vision screening, stick your head in your machine. I mean, I've got horrible vision, and take off your glasses. What can you see? And I said, there's a light on in there. He said, okay, fine. And then go on to the next stop. Much later, after I left Vietnam and was at Fort Hood, Texas, I started getting headaches because I needed a new prescription for my glasses. The prescription I wore out was not strong enough anymore. I went to the eye doctor at Fort Hood, and he said, what's your MOS? And I said, infantry. And he said, you can't be in the infantry with that eyesight. I said, dude, where were you 2 years ago?
All right. So you go now. Where do they send you for basic training?
Fort Campbell, Kentucky.
Okay. And what did the training consist of at that point?
It was a lot of skills. Basically, it was discipline. It was, and they, for lack of a better term, brainwashed you or conditioned you to react to various circumstances as opposed to sitting and thinking about stuff. But they did a lot of marching and drilling and physical conditioning, get you in shape, a lot of marksmanship, first aid, some of the basic skills that were necessary in the military.
Now, how easy or hard was it for you to adjust to that?
It was not a problem. Again, that 3 years of junior ROTC helped a little bit because I became familiar with loudmouth sergeants and a lot of the bluster and whatnot that goes on. And I always, I knew I had a cousin that was went into the service. He was the same age as I was. He went into the service right after high school. And when I was talking to him at my grandfather's funeral, he said, one bit of advice was to try to get through basic training without your drill sergeant knowing your name. And so I, just stayed back in the background, did what I was supposed to do, and just try to be a face in the crowd. And I always kind of liked it because you get these idiots that came in there and they would try to have a debate with the drill sergeant and said, have a ball. You're the one that's going to be, the focus spotlight of attention, and takes it off the rest of us. Makes our life a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. All right. Now, what kind of people were training alongside you, as far as you could tell?
There were a lot of people. There were a fair number of college graduates or who had gone through college and then they got drafted subsequent to that. I would say probably 50% were draftees. There were volunteers for the draft. There were quite a few guys that were in a situation back then where they made an appearance before the judge, and the judge said Army or jail. Had a lot of reservists, National Guard guys, and they were the biggest pain in the butt because they were the ones that were whining and complaining the most. And they said, "Wait a minute, you're going for 6 months of training and you're going back home. What's your beef?" Mm-hmm. And but they did all the screaming and hollering and carrying on. But it was really a broad mix of what was out there. I was in a room. I didn't stay in a bay because we had so many people in the building, and I was in a room with two other guys. One guy was a young kid, just barely turned 18, but he was I think he was from East St. Louis, and he was one of the guys that had a youthful offender record, and the judge said Army or jail, and he was in there. The other guy was we called him Pops. He was a black guy from Nashville who was like 6 months from the expiration date of being drafted. And come to find out later, we went down on a weekend pass to Nashville, and he offered to show us the sights. And he had a few ladies that were working for him. And he was, he was pretty slick. He was a real low-key guy. And come close to the end of payday, whenever there was always a crap game or something going on, he would always get in the middle of it, and at the end of the month when he didn't have any money, he asked me to borrow. He said, I'll borrow me some money, and I'll whatever I win, I'll pay your money back and give you half of my own winnings. And he always came back with money for me, and I'm sure that he may have skimmed a little bit more than his 50%, but he was just a inner city slickster. So it was something you don't see in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Right. Okay. After you complete basic, where do they send you next?
Fort Polk, Louisiana. I have to restrain myself from the nickname is Fort Puke, Louisiana.
All right. How would you describe the place then?
It's awful. It was called Little Vietnam. It's down in the swamps of southern Louisiana. The fort was old and run down, old wooden barracks, sand, swamp, and pine trees. It was just a shithole. just an awful place.
Did it make good preparation for Vietnam?
No, not really, because again, the training was such. Everybody knew that they were going to go to Vietnam. We were in infantry. It was infantry training, so we knew that where we were going to go. I think out of the company, one guy went to Germany, and the rest of us all went to Vietnam. So we kind of knew, had a defeatist attitude that that's where we're going. You did what you were told to do and whatnot. Again, trying to keep things the spotlight on somebody else as opposed to you. But again, the training probably was such that again, when you got into a combat situation, you reacted as opposed to thought about what your options were and which one was the best option to do.
So you hear a noise if you hit the dirt rather than just look around.
Right.
Okay. Were the people who were training you, did you have guys who'd been in Vietnam in the cadre, or?
In basic training, we did. In AIT at Fort Polk, each platoon had two shake and bake sergeants, instant NCOs. They had gone to the NCO Academy, became sergeants after 6 weeks of training or whatever the short period of time was, and then as part of their training, they went and as their leadership training, they went and were the cadre of a platoon in a AIT site. So they had not been to Vietnam. Matter of fact, we saw them over in Vietnam. And we had a senior drill sergeant, and he was just a caricature of John Wayne. But I'm sure he had been to Vietnam. But the officers were all young guys.
But you didn't have people there who had actually been there that were actually sharing practical
Telling more stories. No,
yeah.
No. Just now when you went to your sites for your training, like your first aid or bayonet training or whatever, those guys had all been there.
Okay,
and,
so there were people there then who did have that experience.
Not per se in the company area, but the instructors at the various field sites, teaching camouflage and whatnot. But they had all been there.
Okay. What time of year were you down there?
Fort Campbell. I was in Fort Campbell, July until probably around the 1st of September or so, and then September until the first part of November.
Okay, so it's not as hot down in Louisiana as it would have been in the middle of the year, or?
Yeah, well, it was. Matter of fact, it got pretty darn cold. Fort Campbell, we had a lot of training that was canceled because it was too hot. But at Fort Polk, we didn't run into that. When we actually, towards the end of our 8 weeks there, we went out on a bivouac for a couple of nights, and we had frost on the ground. It was cold. It was cold.
All right.
Wet and cold.
Yeah. Now, did they make you do a lot of training actually in the swamps themselves? Did they try to use those at least?
Yeah, they had compass courses and map reading courses and whatnot that you actually went through. The bivouac itself was not. It was in a drier area. It was a different part of the installation, but But I remember we were doing a map reading course, and the only feature we could find in this area was a small stream on the map. So we were walking along the blue line, and the fellow in front of me, he stepped on a water moccasin, and he went one way, the snake went the other way, and I was like, whoa. Let's keep our eyes peeled for creatures out here.
Right. Okay. Did they make an effort to train you at all about looking out for things like booby traps? Or
Yes, yeah. They did all a lot of the stuff where we ended up with 101st. We didn't run into these types of things, but down south they use a lot of booby traps made out of bamboo and bamboo spikes and all that kind of stuff. They had all that kind of stuff set up. It was not. We did not run into that where we were. They did a fair amount of a little bit of training on how to get in and out of helicopters for landing zones and PZ zones and all that. They took us for a ride in an APC, Armored Personnel Carrier. I swear to God, they stuffed us inside the thing, which over in Vietnam, the guys down south that had the APCs, they rode on top of them. They didn't ride inside, and they put us inside the thing, and they shut the door, and they went over this god-awful obstacle course, and they just, turned us upside down every which way they could in that thing, going through this obstacle course about 35, 40 miles an hour, just bouncing the hell out of you. As a matter of fact, I got out of there, and the stock of my M16 had broken loose. It was twisted at a 45-degree angle from where it was supposed to have been. And it was, I'm like, what? And, that was just stupid. I mean, but it was, they taught you on the various weapons, because we, at Fort Campbell, we trained with M14 rifles, which were the Korean War, World War II weapon. Well, actually Korean War. And at that time they were phasing in the M16. And once they determined what our MOSs were the last week at basic training, they took us all on the range to fire an M16 just for one short bit. Down at Fort Polk, we actually used the M16 as our daily weapon, and then they also exposed us to the grenade launcher and the M60 and the M50 machine guns and various other weapons that you would use, the claymores and all the other various equipment and whatnot that you had. Made sure you learn how to open a can of C rations and eat that junk. And
did you get any specialized training, or were you just an infantryman?
just infantryman.
All right. Now, once you complete AIT, do they send you home and then to Vietnam?
Yeah, I went home on leave. I think I went home on 2 weeks leave, and then went off to San Francisco to process over to Vietnam.
So what's it like to go back home and then know you're heading to Vietnam after that?
Well, it's fait accompli. I mean, ain't anything you can do about it, and that's just, go back home, drink some beer, and and I had been, by that time I had been out of high school about 3 years or so. So anybody that I knew from back in the old days was gone. Either they were off to college or they had gotten married or something else. So I didn't have really any friends left. So just hanging out with family and relatives a little bit, and on my way.
Yep, might as well just get it over with.
Yep.
Okay. How do they get you out to Vietnam?
They flew us on a charter aircraft. We flew from San Francisco up to Anchorage and made a long pit stop up there. Then flew across to Japan, and in the midst of the flight was just jam-packed, every seat was full, and in the midst of the flight over the Pacific, we hit a air pocket, and the aircraft, I don't know how far it dropped, but it seemed like it dropped about a mile. But the aircraft dropped, the cabin lights went out, the stewardesses were up here, you could check out what brand of underwear they were wearing when they were up on the roof, and everybody's like, oh my God, we're gonna die before we even get to Vietnam. But lights came back on, we made our way, and everybody kind of sucked their breath in.
Right.
And then we got over to Japan, refueled and whatnot, then flew in to Vietnam. And it was funny because you always had a bunch of wise guys and whatnot, and shooting off their mouth and stuff. And that plane got real quiet when the approach to, I guess we landed in Ben Hoa. When the approach to Ben Hoa came, it just got real quiet on that airplane, like uh-oh, now it's time to pay the piper.
So what was your first impression of Vietnam when you got off the plane?
When they opened the door and you walked out, the place stunk. It has a distinct odor to it. And it was like, I don't know, combination of bathroom, manure, hot, humid, and just distinct smell. And of course, then the new guys with all their brand new uniforms, just fresh from the factory, we're walking down on the tarmac, and the old guys are getting ready to go home. They're giving them the cat calls and whatnot, and about the fresh meat coming in, and see you later, ha, we made it, type thing. So we spent a lot of time just standing in line waiting to go get bumped from one place to the next.
All right. So then how do they go about processing you once you're there?
We went to a processing center in Benoit and went through and made your do whatever paperwork processing they did. Now, when I was at the reception center in Benoit, they took a bunch of us infantry guys and commandeered us and put us on bunker guard around the perimeter of the camp. I'm going to say it's probably anywhere between a week and 2 weeks, and that was pretty sweet because my job, I didn't actually pull bunker guard at night. And my job, me and another fella, they issued us shotguns, and we rode in the back of a Jeep with a permanent party senior NCO and his driver. And our job was to close up the clubs and where the bands were and whatnot to make sure there was no ruckus. And they gave us a shotgun, a couple shells, and we sat around and went and watched the shows and close up the enlisted club and the EM club and whatnot, make sure there wasn't any fighting or carrying on. And if the manager or whatever had to be escorted because of hauling funds or whatever, we escorted them. But usually they would come over and pick us up about 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they would take me and the other fellow and they go back to their hooch where these guys lived, and it was nothing like I ever saw subsequent in Vietnam. But really nice facilities, and they took us over there and they're cooking steaks on the grill, and here, you need a beer, a cold soda, you got a fridge over here, and so we're chewing down pretty good on food and drink over there, and of course the guys were doing some wishful thinking, and they said, oh, you know what? I just heard that the Army's great for rumors. I just heard that they're gonna have us do this the entire year. We're not gonna go anyplace else for rest of the day. I said, yeah, right. Dream on. So it was just a temporary thing, but that was pretty good. Now, one of the wake up aspects of being in Vietnam, we were sitting and watching a USO band playing, and it was a bunch of Filipinos, and the girls were singing the Gleam Gleam Glass of Home. I said, oh my God. This just ain't right.
All right. Now, while you were there on Benoit waiting for something to happen, did they ever get rocketed or mortared, or was it quiet?
Not there, no.
Okay. Now, eventually, though, they tell you you're going someplace else.
Yeah, it came time for us to be reassigned to our permanent units, and an NCO came with a clipboard with a list, and he started reading off names. These guys are, basically it was alphabetical. These first 5 guys, 10 guys, you're going to the Big Red 1. Next bunch are going to the 1st Cav. The next bunch are going to 25th Infantry. And he was reading the list off, and he said, and you last 13 poor son of a bitches are going to the 101st.
All right. Now, why does that make you poor son of a bitches?
Evidently, they were way up there in I-Corps, up by the DMZ, and there were just all kinds of bad guys. It was a real Indian country up there, and it was just because of the likelihood of seeing some bad stuff go on.
Okay. Now, approximately what date was this now that you're getting assigned?
It was probably around the 20th of December.
Okay. So December 69 then.
Yeah.
Okay. So Hamburger Hill had already happened
Right.
earlier that year, and that
Right.
was noted for the casualty levels
Right,
and so forth.
right.
So, yeah, okay. All right. Now, how then did they get you up to the 101st?
We went to the airstrip and we threw our duffel bags on the floor of a C-130, and we laid on top of our duffel bags. We didn't even have seats. We just grabbed, they have little rings that they use to tie down loads. When the plane was taking off, you lifted up one of those rings and hung on, and we didn't slide out the back door. It was really, really sweet, sweet ride.
But, all right. And then where do you land?
Somewhere, either Camp Eagle, Fubai,
Okay.
wherever the headquarters area was.
Right, okay.
I don't know where I think the airstrip was probably in Fubai.
Right.
Which they're basically side by
Next
side.
to each other. Right. Okay. So you land there, and then what do they do with you?
Again, process you in, take your orders and cut more orders or whatever. And matter of fact, at that point, I was talking to a clerk that was processing me in, and he said, I got promoted from E1 to E2 at the end of basic training, but I never got paid for it. And so he said, he pointed this out to me, and he was like, oh boy, $10 or whatever it was. I mean, it wasn't like we were getting rich. And so he said, tell you what, you go over there and buy me a soda out of the fridge there, and I'll fix this so that you get your back pay. So he got himself a knee high for a nickel or whatever we paid for him. That was the other thing in basic training. I remember the first time we got paid, they paid us in cash, and the pay officer, one of the lieutenants in the company, came in with a briefcase, and you lined us all up, and you had to go up and salute, and they gave you your money. And for my first month in the Army, I looked and I had $79. And I said, I thought Lincoln outlawed slavery a long time ago.
All right. Did they give you any training there at Camp Eagle or whatever did you get before
Not
you went
there.
in the field?
From there, we were only there for a day or two probably, and then they sent us up to Camp Evans where they had it's called, the acronym was CERTS. I don't know what the Screaming Eagle something, and there you went through about a week of training, refresher training, before they sent you to a unit.
Okay. And was this more geared toward what you would actually encounter in Vietnam?
Right. Yeah. It was. We did some rappelling. Gave us a little bit of instruction on Vietnamese culture. What to do, what not to do, what's offensive to Vietnamese, and what differences between American culture and Vietnamese culture. Some real quick buzzwords on Vietnamese words, but again, setting up basically a refresher what you went through in basic and AIT.
Okay. And then once you do, at this point, do you know what unit you're going to go to, or is that still?
No, that you get once you finish.
Okay.
Finish the search training.
All right. And so, what unit then do they assign you to?
Well, I was assigned to B Company, 2nd of the 506th Infantry.
Okay. And then, where were they when you were assigned to them?
They were on the company was on the other side of Camp Evans.
Okay.
The search was right on Highway 1 on the east. I guess it would be the east side of the post, and our battalion area our company area was way over on the west wire.
Okay. But they were on the base now. Had they been there for a while, or they were just in?
I believe. No, the company itself was the facilities had been there for a while. The company itself was there on stand down. Of course, at Christmas time, usually there's a ceasefire or whatnot, and I believe that they had just gotten into some stuff, and they were refitting and getting new resources, new bodies to fill the vacant slots.
So you're going in there as a replacement.
Right.
Okay. What kind of reception do you get when you join your unit?
I think we were kind of that had the deer in the floodlight look. I don't remember anything really one way or the other. It wasn't any negative or harassment or haranguing type thing. Just get here, do this, do that, you know, blah, blah, blah. We had to go up to the battalion. They took all of our clothes away. The only clothes that we kept were what's on our back. Turned in the rest of our fatigues and our boots and whatever else that they had issued us when we came in country. Again, processing paperwork and whatnot, and then they issued you your, whatever you needed, rucksacks, and started giving you your supplies and whatnot that you were going to need to go out in the field. We ended up, there was a bunch of us that got assigned to the B company at the same time, and they actually made well, at the time it was actually the 4th platoon. We later became the 1st platoon, but they actually made a platoon of cherries, brand new guys. The vast majority of us were new guys. There were Steve Wallace was our lieutenant. He had been there for a while, and 2 of the NCOs, the squad leaders, had been there for a little bit, a few months, and then they had probably no more than 3, 4 guys in each squad that had been there for 3, 4, or 5 months, and the rest of us were all brand spanking new.
Do you have a sense of sort of how large the company was, or how large a platoon was once you joined?
We probably had 4 platoons, and there maybe were 20, 25 people in the platoon.
Okay. All right.
Which quickly dwindled down because we never had 4 platoons after that.
All right. How long did you stay on base before you go out on patrol?
Okay, we must have gone over this. We were at Certs on Christmas Day. So I remember they had a big banquet, a big feast there for Christmas, and some of the guys, the guys that had been in country, they got to go to the Bob Hope show. I'm trying to remember where New Year's, if we were on, where we were on New Year's. It was somewhere between Christmas and New Year's. They actually, as part of the stand down, they also had some training going on. We went out outside the gate west of the fort or the post, and again shot weapons on a range, and did some. They strung some wire, strung a rope across the creek, and we had to ford that or traverse that. So there was probably 3, 4 days of training that we did out there before. Then we actually went out in the field on the day that the Super Bowl was held in 1970. So the game was playing on Armed Forces radio as I went in the supply room to get my junk.
All right. And then, I guess, what are you, now, during this first time when you're on Camp Evans and you're going through the training and these kinds of things and the initial patrols, did the camp itself ever take any incoming or have any problems, or was it quiet?
I don't think so. It was pretty quiet. There may have been, sporadically you took incoming rocket rounds, but it was a pretty good size camp, and but there was nothing that was, I don't recall anything at that particular time.
So you didn't have to go looking for a bunker or anything like that?
No, I don't recall doing that.
Okay. So what's your sort of first real combat patrol or mission?
Okay, we went on the field on Super Bowl Sunday, and we actually walked out. We're not helicoptered out. We walked out the back gate and went out into the lowlands west of Camp Evans, and that's when the rubber met the road, and was like, okay, this is serious stuff now. And and you're again brand new, you're not knowing what was going on. They put us out there for a reason. It was relatively secure. In hindsight, it was relatively secure. Chances of even running into any booby traps or anything was pretty remote. But they wanted to get us to get our stuff together and get some sense of what was going on, and to get acclimated, and but I'm sure us new guys going out there, we were positive that there was a bad guy behind every weed, and we were looking for him. Scared half to death. But.
Now, did they, as you were out there, were the non-coms or anybody, were they giving you any coaching or telling you don't bunch up or whatever? Or
yeah, that was always. Steve Wallace was big on. he kept us alive. He was very skilled in what he was doing, and very strict in sound control and you know, spacing and how to do your patrols and whatnot. So that was pretty well established. You know, we pretty much knew what to do, and it didn't take a whole lot of coaching when it wasn't like they were yelling at you in basic training.
Right. All right. Now, how long did you stay out?
We went out in the field, like I said, that's the first part of Super Bowl Sunday of January of 70, and we did not come back in the rear until June of 70.
Okay. Now, would they pick you up in helicopters and move you to different places?
Well,
or what happened?
Yeah, we were in the lowlands, probably probably in February, first part of March, end of February, first part of March. We just worked the lowlands, where we ran patrols around that area, and that was monsoon season up in the northern I-Corps. So the mountains were fogged in and rained in, so it was hard getting in and out of there. And you know, once you got in there, it was hard getting resupplied. So they had to wait until the monsoons let up, and then again, probably the first part of March, we were airlifted up into the mountains.
Okay. While you were in the lowlands, did you have any contact with the enemy?
No. Matter of fact, I think one of the other squads in the platoon set up a mechanical ambush, and they with some claymores and whatnot, and they killed a couple of chickens. But it was, matter of fact, for about a week we actually just went in. Our squad actually just hid. We just went into a spot, got a real thick vegetated area, and kind of burrowed in and set up in there, and we just stayed there for a while, and we didn't do anything. Just lounged about, unbeknownst to those up high. But no, I think, you know, probably about the second or third night that we were out, I was an assistant machine gunner. My machine gunner was a fellow named Martin Santiago. He was from Puerto Rico, and we were in a position, and we were on a little knoll down there in the flats, and it was barren. No vegetation or anything, and we were just on the crest of the knoll, or just below the crest of the knoll. So if you sat up at night, you know, you could be easily spotted. And Santiago and I were in our position, and we were hearing some rustling and whatnot out in front of us. And I was like, "Oh, Santiago, what the hell? What's this?" He said, you know, "There's a gook out there." You know, and we're laying there on our backs, and we couldn't sit up because we'd be silhouetted. And I remember laying there with my M16 pointed between my feet, and this noise is coming closer and closer. I knew, "Sonny, what are we gonna do?" Said, don't shoot. And all of a sudden I got a nudge on the bottom of my foot, and it was a wild pig. And I probably jumped about 1.5 feet off the ground using my backside muscles. Scared the ever loving poo out of me. And I swear to God, you know, it was a sapper or something coming up to get us, and a stupid pig came up to the perimeter and bumped up against us, and he took off like a rascal.
All right. So
that was my combat experience.
Up to that point. All right. Now, at any point, did other more experienced guys suggest to you that, you know, this isn't the real thing yet?
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, Bob Presley, we were sitting around chewing the fat one day, and a bunch of us, and he had a map out, and that was right before we were going into the up to the mountains, and he pulled out the map and he said, "See, this is the Ashaw Valley." And he said, see all these green dots on there? He said, "That's a tree. And behind every one of those trees is a gook waiting to shoot you." He said, "You don't want to go up there." It's just a bad place. But he had been up there, I think, in the fall. They had run into some junk up in the mountains, and they had quite a few losses. So he was familiar with some of the combat stuff that we hadn't encountered yet. You know, and that was a lot of what we were doing. It was, you know, what happens to the ear? What have you seen? And you know, trying to get a feel for what was going on and what might happen.
And you're just getting experience with the routine and setting up a perimeter at night,
Right,
or setting
right.
ambushes or other things like
Right,
that.
right.
Okay. Okay. Now finally they come, the helicopters pick you up, they take you into the mountains. Now did they put you into a name to take you to a fire base or just an LZ?
They took us to an LZ. I have no idea what it was, where it was. You know, in the book Ripcord, they talk about hills,
Yeah.
all these hill numbers
Yeah.
and whatnot. I have no idea. You know, I was not in charge. I didn't have a map. I was part of the Elephant Trail. I just, you know, got in line and followed the guy in front of me. I had no
Right.
idea where we were, but we went up to this landing zone. They airlifted the entire company up into that LZ, and we worked that area. Probably for about close to a month.
Okay. And what was, so you worked the area, was there kind of a process or a routine or stuff you did day to day?
Yeah, we were going out on patrols to seek the enemy, and the landing zone was on top. That was kind of the base area that we were anchored in, and there was a ridge line that ran across, and it was really steep, and we had to use this one path on top of the ridge line consistently in order to get to and fro. I mean, the place was. We probably knew that the place was crawling with North Vietnamese, but we didn't see them. You know, couldn't find them, or we weren't finding them. But we were, you know, constantly on patrols, go out on ambush at night, trying to, you know, track down, or in some cases try to stay away from the bad guys. And that's when at that time that's when we had our first encounters with the North Vietnamese and guys getting hurt and killed.
And do you remember the first time you actually kind of come under fire?
Yeah, we were walking back to the LZ from where we were patrolling, and a fellow by the name of Marvin Shell was walking point, and he was from Johnson City, Tennessee, and he saw some tracks across the trail, sandal tracks that the North Vietnamese used to use, wear sandals that were made out of tires. And he saw the tracks, and so he stopped everybody, and he bent down to look at them and check things out. And it was a sniper over behind a tree and shot him in the head and killed him. Fortunately, Santiago and I were towards the back of the pile, and we did not actually see him. We never saw his body even after we moved him on. But we were called up with a machine gun to spray the area with fire and whatnot. That was the first combat incident.
And in this first extended jungle patrol you're on there, was that typical of the encounters, a sniper here? Or?
Yeah, it was just onesies and twosies. We had there was one of the other platoons went out on a patrol. They had brought a scout dog in, and to do whatever scout dogs do, and they always extol the virtues of a scout dog and how they'll find the bad guys and keep you out of trouble and all that. Scout dog took the platoon, and he was at the lead of the platoon and walked him into an ambush. And the handler got killed, the lieutenant got killed, the platoon sergeant got killed. I think one other guy got killed, the dog got killed, and several other guys got wounded, and we had to go down and retrieve them. And a couple of North Vietnamese popped up out of a spider holes, and they ambushed them and shot them up. And whenever I see, the virtues, people extolling the virtues of scout dogs, that comes to mind, and I'm somewhat more cynical of my view. But we, as a follow-up to that, later on, several months later, we captured a North Vietnamese, and when they interrogated him, he was one of the ambushers. And he said, "Yeah, I was in on that ambush," and told us what happened and whatnot. And I said, "Yeah, and we took the dog and we ate him." That was the first fresh meat they had in a long time.
All right. Now, what would you do at night when you're out on these, when you're out in the field like that?
Either, if you would either set up a perimeter and you'd have 2 or 3 guys in a position. Somebody was on watch, so you'd rotate it so that, you know, it was up to you to decide whether you're gonna be on watch for an hour or 2 hours or a half hour, whatever it was. You can try to get some sleep. Usually the platoon set out one group of people, you know, 4, 5, 6 people on an ambush to set up an ambush someplace at night, on a trail or someplace to try to catch you hit, because the Vietnamese did travel at night a good bit. And that was just basically trying to get through the night, try to get some sleep, try to get your 4 or 5 hours of sleep.
Now, on this first one, did they try to probe your perimeter, or did you get attacked, or was it mostly quiet?
It was, we didn't get probed. Now, on I think the day after Shell got killed, we were in we were in a perimeter. I think there was 2 platoons in a perimeter up there in that landing zone, and they put me, and I was carrying a machine gun at the time, and they put me and my assistant gunner, was a brand new guy, just came in country the day before, and his name was Chip Collins, and another fellow, Rich Suda. The 3 of us were put on a listening post, and the purpose of a listening post, they put us on the platoon was on the south side of the landing zone, had a landing zone which was a cleared out area. We were on the other side of the landing zone. Our purpose was to, as a listening post, we were supposed to sit and observe, and if the bad guys were coming, to let the other, the rest of the company know that they were coming. In hindsight, when I thought about it years later, I said, basically that's a suicide mission, because there's 3 of us out there, and if there's poo gonna happen, we're gonna be right in the crossfire, and ain't nobody gonna come and get us. But we were on that listening post that night, and we had just finished digging our hole, and we were eating C rations, eating our meal, or reading our mail, whatever. And the 3 of us, we were sitting in the hole that we had dug, with our feet dangling in the hole, and I noticed some movement. I looked to my right, and the 90-degree angle on the trail was a North Vietnamese guy, in full uniform with an AK-47. He's creeping up the trail, and I nudged Rich Suda, who was sitting on my right, and I said, "Rich, gook." And he looked up, and he looked down the trail, and he saw another one. And I was taking really good care of my weapon. I had it perched up against a tree so it wouldn't get dirty, just out of reach. And so as I was telling him about the gook, I'm trying to real slowly reach back and get my M16 so this gook doesn't see me doing it. And Rich sees the other one down the trail. He grabs his gun, and he starts firing. So I jumped up, got my gun. The North Vietnamese guy turned and looked at me, and I fired him up. He never got a shot off, thank God. And then when, I don't know, probably fired 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds, whatever. And then we got done, and it was like, we had the radio, and I could hear on the radio the call signs, "What's going on?" Blah, 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 blah. I was like, "I ain't got time for you." And we got done, and I looked at Rich, and we kind of looked, and then Chip Collins, who was the new guy, he was down on the bottom of the hole with a steel pot. he was hunkered in there like a turtle, and which is just as well, because if he would have picked up a gun, he would have been either shooting that over the top of my shoulder or over the top of a Suda's shoulder. We probably could have gotten shot in the back by him. But so anyway, Captain Williams was our company commander at the time, and once we got settled down a little bit, and they brought some people over, and in my mind, I shot at this fellow, and I swear to God, I hit him, because he wasn't any more than, from much more than here to the wall away, less than, probably 20 feet, and I have this image of every time a bullet hit him, he would spin. He would spin faster and faster, and we went over there to look for him, and nothing. There was no body, no blood trail. And the next day, the patrol went down that trail and they found his pith helmet, but the guy disappeared.
Yeah.
And so Bill Williams was all ticked off because he wanted a body count. He wanted to have a dead guy, and so he let us know how our shortcomings and our failings and what a disgrace to the Army we were and all that kind of crap. And I said, well, Captain Williams, we we exposed our site. We're not going to be able to stay out here. And I was, that was my realization. The bad guys were on the front door. I said, let's go back here where there's safety in numbers. We'll go back over to the perimeter. He said, no, you're going to go on the other side of the trail and set up your listening posts over there. And so we found an area with a couple of great big logs, and we didn't have time to dig in. It was getting towards dark already. So we just wedged ourselves in between these logs, and I mean that was the first time that I was knee knocking, teeth chattering, scared. I mean I was just scared to death, and so we went over there, and I said, okay, there's going to be 2 of us on watch all the time, and in my mind I was absolutely sure that I had just shot up the nephew of Ho Chi Minh. And he was going to get a phone call or something, or the Tomahawk Trail or whatever, and the wrath of the North Vietnamese Army was going to be coming down upon me that evening. So and it started raining a little bit, and we heard noise. There was noises out there, real or imagined, and I thought to myself, these son of a guns sticking me out here. Said, if I'm going to be out here scared to death and awake, them suckers ain't going to sleep either. So, but every 5 minutes I called them, I got movement out here. I got movement out here. So we want to keep those guys up too. so I'm suffering, they're suffering too. But we made it through the night, but I don't know. I probably just out of sheer fatigue probably fell asleep right before dawn for a couple of hours. But I'm thinking all 3 of us were awake all night long. But fortunately, that was the only up close and personal contact I had with the North Vietnamese the entire time I was in Vietnam.
All right. So that patrol eventually then concludes. Do you go back for a stand down, or what happens?
No, we on the 1st of April we evacuated, or we were airlifted out, and we went to Ripcord, Firebase Ripcord, to build the fire. Our mission was to go out there, secure the firebase so they could build the firebase there. The division was going to go into the North Vietnamese were obviously just based in the A Shau Valley, and their supply lines ran through the A Shau Valley, and the goal was to cut those supply lines. And the Ripcord was going to be the fire base that provided the artillery support to back up the infantry troops that were going to be doing the missions out there. So we were airlifted to our company was airlifted onto Firebase Ripcord on the 1st of April. Fortunately, I guess, I was in one of the tail end loads coming in. But I remember flying in, and again at that time I was carrying a machine gun, and I was sitting on the edge of the doorway of the helicopter, and I just sensed, there was just a sense that something wasn't right, and the door gunner was a little more agitated than I had seen previously, and then I looked down and I could see puffs of black smoke or dirt or whatever on the hillside where we were going to land. What the heck is that? And the door gunner was encouraging us to get the heck out of that helicopter before we even got close to getting near the ground. And Terry Ratcliffe was acting as our platoon sergeant, platoon leader at that time. He met the helicopter and told us that it was hot, and told me where to go and set up a position, and we were taking incoming, and I guess at that point they had already had a number of casualties and whatnot, which I knew nothing about, and so we went up and set up a perimeter and tried to dig in, and there was, then it dawned on me there were mortars landing around the area, and they used to tell us in basic training or AIT that you would learn how to dig a foxhole with your buttons on your shirt. And that was about that time. And they also told you that, you know, if you ever got into a firefight, you would learn how to use your steel pot as cover, and you would get your whole body behind your steel pot and hide behind that. You know, Ripcord had been an old Marine Corps fire base years before, and it had been bombed and buried and whatnot. And the area that he told me to go to was, Collins and I got into a shallow depression, and we got our entrenching tools and tried to dig a hole, and it was just hard as a rock, and just barely scraping. And I scraped, got down no more than an inch or two, and there was concertina wire buried underneath the area that we were in, and we couldn't dig through there, and it was just like trying to bust a rock. So we never actually did dig a hole, and we were there for a little while, and then a mortar landed not too far from my left, and I got a face full of debris, rocks and dirt and sand and whatnot, and I got a little piece of shrapnel, just a little sliver landed in my jaw. And what, you know, I didn't know, you know, it all felt like I didn't know what had hit me with all the debris that hit me, and I kind of dusted myself off, and I felt this little thing sticking there, and I pulled that out. Oh, this is getting serious now.
Yeah, so were you firing at this point, or did you not have a target?
There was no targets. I had the machine gun. I don't believe that I even fired any rounds up there, because there was no ground attack. It was all mortars coming in, and then we were in that position probably a half hour, 45 minutes, and Terry. The Ratcliffe came down to check on his guys, and he was stopped at the two guys in the hole next to us, Slim Williams and Shaky Richards. He was checking on them, and a mortar landed behind him and killed him instantaneously. And you know, I remember, you know, looking back up, and he was laying on his back, and he had such a peaceful look on his face, like he was sleeping. And it was like, you know, what the hell? And that was the first guy that I saw get killed, and it hurt a lot because he was really a really good guy.
Now, what happens then on Ripcord after that? Do you stay? Do you move off the hilltop?
We spent the day there, and because of all the incoming and whatnot, and then the casualties, and they had crashed a couple of helicopters, I guess. I didn't see them, but we moved off that night. They had our company move down a ridge line to hook up with another company that was on the next hill over, and basically what we did, we lined up, we did an actual elephant walk. Everybody got in line on this trail, and it was dark, you grabbed the rucksack of the guy in front of you, the guy behind you grabbed the rucksack, your rucksack, and there was an aircraft flying over the top, either a Chinook helicopter or a C-130, dropping flares. And when the flare went off, you stood up and you proceeded as long as there was light. And I was thinking, I said, one North Vietnamese guy with a machine gun, he can take the whole company out. And I was like, let's hurry up and get this over with, because this is not a good deal at all. And you know, it just violated all of the principles of maneuvering, because you didn't want to maneuver in bright light, but we had to go there because we had to get off that hill. And we hooked up with this other company, spent the night there, woke up the next morning, and where we had ended up sleeping, I looked, and not more than 3 feet in front of me was a ledge, a cliff that had dropped off about 20 feet, 25 feet, 30 feet. And just through the grace of God, one of us didn't step off off over there and break our full neck. But it was like, holy crap, what the heck was going on here? So Then we moved out, and then I think the next day or so we got socked in, we got fogged in, and the helicopters couldn't come out. And we moved from one point to another and trying to get resupplied, because we were supposed to get resupplied on Ripcord. It was a time for us to be resupplied. We had run out of food and supplies and whatnot. And so we were trying to get someplace where we could get resupplied, and we ran out of food. I found out at that point that you could eat a banana tree. We had one of our kit cars and scouts, or Vietnamese scouts. We were hanging around or stopped someplace, and he told us that we could eat a banana tree. So he took a machete and he chopped it down and he cut open the core of the banana tree and cut it up in pieces and put it in a canteen cup and boiled it, threw some seasoning salts or whatever in there, spices whatever we could muster, and we ate that. Basically, it's like eating boiled celery. But that filled our belly for a short period of time. But
now, was your company still together, or were you broken?
Pretty much. The whole company was together yet, trying to keep us in one spot so we could all be resupplied.
Okay. And the fellow who had been killed, was had he been your acting platoon leader? Or
Platoon, he was the acting platoon leader. We were short. We didn't have any lieutenants.
So who's leading your platoon then at this point? Just another sergeant from another squad, or?
I guess one. Yeah, probably. I think McQuaid, Randy McQuaid, or whatever his name was, McQuaid. He was another sergeant. I think he was pretty much in charge of us. And I think because we were with the company, basically Captain Williams was, given directions anyway.
Right.
Then we eventually, they were bringing aircraft out and they were parachuting supplies, and they're trying to tell you, can you hear us now? Can you hear the helicopter now? And in the valleys, the mountains with the sound reverberating and whatnot, and you couldn't tell where anything was. You think they're right overhead, but they're probably 5 miles away because the sound carried. They would drop loads of supplies, parachute loads of supplies down, and they would send out a patrol to go get them, and the patrol would find a parachute with all the ropes cut and the supplies all gone. Vietnamese were eating real good.
Okay. Now, that tape is days out there trying to get resupplied. You're talking about that, and they try to drop supplies to you in the fog, and by the time you found where they were, the supplies had been liberated by someone else.
Right. Eventually, we hooked up with another company. I don't know, it was Delta Company, and we finally did get some supplies and got some sea rations in, and it was dark. I remember it was dark when we hooked up with them, and somebody came around and threw a sea ration meal. And of course, some meals were better than others, and some you just absolutely refused to eat. Matter of fact, we're going back to backstep a little bit. When we were traversing, trying to get resupplied and trying to by the time we ate the banana tree, we were actually going through old positioned NDPs at night, digging up the old dumps, because we would throw away the fruitcake and the what was that crud? The date pudding. We would just throw that away. We didn't even, usually we tried to, if we threw any food away, we would try to puncture the cans with a can opener so that the bugs would get it and the Vietnamese could not eat it. But so they want the fruitcake, they want the date pudding, have at it. They can eat this junk. And we were actually digging up old dumps at old sites to try to find food. People were actually eating the fruitcake and the date pudding.
So the Vietnamese actually left that for you.
Yeah, they probably didn't want it either. But anyway, so somebody came around and they just actually threw meals, so we couldn't. It was dark, we couldn't heat them up, and we were so doggone hungry anyway. And I remember I got whatever the meal was. I couldn't even read the box; it was so dark. Opened up the can and I started wolfing the stuff down. It was that nasty old beefsteak. And the beefsteak was 3 slabs of this gristle-laden part of cow that nobody else wanted in the world wanted, and it had this gelatinous layer of scum over the top. And after about halfway through, I'm realizing I'm eating that crap. I was hungry now. That was the only time I ate beefsteak. Said, somebody didn't do me right here. Somebody owes me for doing this to me.
At what point then do you get either properly resupplied or taken out of there?
Then we started doing our regular missions, and I don't recall exactly what we were doing, but we, I guess about a week, see, Alpha Company tried to go on Ripcord, they got run off, then about a week or 2 weeks before we did.
Mm-hmm.
Then they sent our company up there to try to build it and secure it, and then we got run off. And then another week or 10 days later, Charlie Company walked up. They did not do an air assault. They walked up and they met no resistance, and they built the firebase. They
Right.
secured it and built the firebase. So we were working, doing seek and destroy or whatever, search and destroy or find the bad guys in the area around Ripcord at that point.
Okay. Now, during that period of several weeks there, were you encountering many enemy at that point?
Not really, no. Well, my platoon did. Every once in a while we come across a cache, an old headquarters area or something or sleeping areas where the North Vietnamese had spent, and find bits and pieces of stuff. But we had no contact. We did not have any contact with them when I was out with the company. Then we were out there doing patrols and stuff around there, and then we went up on Ripcord again in May to pull perimeter security on the firebase. And it was a continuous process. You're always building, adding on. So during the day we were stringing more concertina wire or barbed wire or digging new holes or putting a bathroom in or something, digging latrines or something. We always had some sort of patrol, but it was I guess the kind of the theory behind the being assigned to the fire base was there was a break from being out in the field. It was somewhat more secure, so there was less of a threat of enemy attack, per se, and it was kind of basically it was kind of a stand down out in the middle of the field. So we were assigned there for a while, and unfortunately, one night they decided to have a mad minute, where at midnight, at the stroke of midnight, they wanted you to fire up all the old ammo and flares, excess flares, and throw grenades and just make a big old ruckus. It was supposed to be a tension reliever or a morale booster type thing. Bill Williams, a couple days prior to that, Mad Minute had issued a directive that nobody was to be outside of their fighting position, their hole, without a flak jacket on. And stupid lifer making more stupid rolls. And so anyway, we had this Mad Minute, and there were 3 of us assigned to a hole. And so we're shooting off flares and throwing grenades and, firing up tracer rounds and, have a good old time. And the guy in the hole next to me, there was a guy in the hole next to me who was new in country. And he threw a grenade, and he did not pay attention during grenade throwing class. And he threw it like a ball instead of lobbing it. And when he threw it, it hit one of the support posts of the concertina wire, and it bounced back inside the perimeter. And I was standing outside the perimeter because I needed some good room to throw stuff, and without a flak jacket on, and got hit in the shoulder with a piece of shrapnel from this grenade, and got it was a very small piece of shrapnel, and it was just like a sting, when I got hit, but it was enough to know what the hell, shit, I got hit, and I told. I said to Presley, I was in the hole with Bob Presley, and he said, Presley, I got hit. And he said, well, you better go see a medic. I said, William said he was going to court-martial anybody that wasn't wearing a flak jacket if they were outside the hole. He said, well, lie to him, tell me you were in the hole. Never dawned on me to lie. So Bob Presley taught me how to lie. But I went over to the next hole and got hold of this he started yelling at this kid that threw that stupid grenade and yanked him by the back of the neck and gave him a kick in the backside and said, "You dumb dope." So I went up to the see the medic up on top of the fire base, and he looked at it, and it was not a dire emergency. He just put a bandage on it, and said, "Come on back up tomorrow. We'll fly you back to Camp Evans in the morning." And so I went back to Camp Evans. They did an X-ray. There was just a real small piece of shrapnel hit the shoulder, hit my collarbone, took a little notch out of my collarbone, and the doc at the aid station said to go down to the hospital at Fubai and see if they want to do surgery on it or whatever, take care of it. So, okay, fine. I said, "How do I get to Fubai?" And the Army, always taking care of their troops, always providing for the best. And, well, what you need to do is go to the front gate over here at Camp Evans and hitchhike a ride down to the hospital. So I had to make my way over to the front gate and talk to the MP at the gate and said, I need to hitch a ride to the hospital down at Fubai. So somebody was coming through, and two guys were in a Jeep, and they were going near the hospital, so I jumped in the back of the Jeep, and that was my medical transport to the hospital. And we were driving through Way. When you go down Highway 1, you go through Way, and then Fubai is next down. And I was sitting in the back of the Jeep, and I had my steel pot on the fender portion there of the Jeep. I had my arm, I was propped up, sitting back there, sprawled out, real nice in the sunshine. And a little Vietnamese kid, 6, 7 years old, did see him. He comes running up behind the Jeep, grabs hold of my Timex watch, snaps that thing off my wrist, and before I could even look around, all I could see was his butt in the crowd of people, and all these people were laughing at me because that's what these little street urchins did, was steal, headed down, and he snapped that thing off without any stole that watch off my wrist, lickety split. So anyway, I went to take my steel pot to throw at him, and I thought, "Oh, gee," it's caused me more pain. So anyway, we finished our ride, dropped me off at the hospital, and checked into with a nurse, and very nice. Hadn't been treated that nicely in a long time, and very concerned about my well-being. Asked what happened and whatnot, and then I had a bandage on my finger, and I had it's called a paronychia, where the tissue underneath your fingernails gets infected and it starts bulging out at the base of the fingernail. And I had that, out in the field you get all kinds of junk, you're always full of jungle rot and sores and whatnot. And she said, "Well, let me take that bandage off and we'll have the doctor look at that too." And so then when they took me back in the operating room, and he cut on my shoulder, and I thought he was taking the shrapnel out, and then he cut this finger open and lanced that open and took all the gunk out of there and cleaned that up. And then when I was laying there, the head honcho in the surgery room doc comes in, and he's having this rather animated, intense discussion with the doctor who did my surgery. And he's coming over and he's testing my arm strength and flexibility and feeling and all that kind of stuff. And evidently there's a whole lot of nerves that run through that area of your chest, and they really don't want to operate in there if they don't have to, for fear of doing some nerve damage. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I thought he took the shrapnel out. Well, years later, after I got out of service, I had my disability check up with the VA. Filed a claim for that I notified them that I had gotten that wound, and they told me I got 0% disability rating for a shrapnel wound to right shoulder with retained foreign body. And I said, "Well, wait a minute." So I really don't know if it's in there or if it's not. So, but anyway, I did the surgery, spent the night in the hospital there. It was a little field hospital, and then the next day they transported a bunch of us down to the Air Force Hospital in Cameron Bay to recuperate. We got on a C-130 and it was a medevac aircraft. And that was probably one of the more depressing things I saw the entire time I was there. I was ambulatory, so I was able to walk, and they had the web seating for us on the side that were ambulatory. But the center of the aircraft it had 2 rows of the superstructure held 4 stretchers, and they stacked the guys that were really messed up. They stacked them 4 high and however many deep, and it was like making a milk run on the old airplane rides. We stopped at every little hospital, and they kept bringing on more people and stacking them up, and the nurses were going up and checking IVs and all that stuff. And then on the way down, when we were flying down there, I developed an abscess on my knee. Big old abscess formed on the outside of my knee, and so I got down to Cameron, the hospital, and the doc was checking me out. I also showed him that thing, and it had burst by that time. So again, they put a bandage on that and put me on some antibiotics, I guess, to fight off both the infections. And I had to, because they did the surgery on the shoulder, they wanted, whenever you had a shrapnel wound or a bullet wound, they did surgery, they wanted it to heal from the inside before they did any. They wanted the tissue to heal before they did any suturing. So that's basically why I was there until they let it heal for about a week or so before they put any stitches in. And but they told me I was there. I ended up in the hospital there for 2 weeks. And towards the end of that 2 weeks, they told me that they were considering sending me to Cameron or to Camp Zama in Japan because they thought I had a blood disorder because of the infections that I had. Camp Zama, that's the first step back to the States. I said, all right. And lo and behold, 24 hours later, the infections cleared up. Go get your junk and go back onto the field. So made my way back up and went back out in the field. And I think the company was still on the Firebase when I went back up there. And but anyway, went and joined the company back in the field. And then we were out there probably, I think until about the first week or so of June, and we went back and we had a stand down. The whole battalion had a stand down in the back of Camp Evans, where we went back there for a week and got refitted and got shots and went to Eagle Beach for a night, I guess, and drink some beer and watch USO bands and all that. And, I remember they checked our weapons. They had armor checking all the M16s. I gave them my M16, and he had a metal rod that went down the barrel, and it was supposed to be a snug fit to determine whether the barrel hadn't warped or whatever. And he put it in mine and went whoa, 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 whoa. So if I shot my weapon, instead of my bullet making a smooth transition downfield, it was doing one of these looping moves to go down there. So I probably couldn't hit anything if I had to at any distance with that thing because it had been worn. But we got refitted and then went back out in the field.
Now, at some point, you wound up working with Chuhoi, a Vietnamese. Did that come later?
Yeah, I went back out in the field, and then towards the end of June, I guess, first part of July, they called me back to Camp Evans and sent me to a combat leaders course at the CERTS school. Combat leaders course was for it was basically a week of training for Spec 4s who they thought had a potential someday of being promoted to sergeant. And it was pretty much refresher training and rappel, and basically what you went through with certs and some little bit of leadership training type thing to go in there. So that was a week long. It was pretty. They considered it rather important because when you went back, you actually got brand new fatigues issued to you, and you got your name tag on them, and you got all the patches and whatnot that you're supposed to have, and got new boots. You didn't go there looking like a bum that just came out of the field. You looked fresh and dignified. So we went back there for a week and did that training. Got done with that. I went back to the company area, and first sergeant met me and he said, we need to send somebody to pick up a Kit Carson scout. Would you be interested in doing that? And by that time, the action around Ripcord had been picking up. Mm-hmm. And I thought, 2 weeks at Camp Evans, 2 weeks on Ripcord. And I think, the longevity would suggest staying here at Camp Evans, so, even though I didn't necessarily agree with the program or whatnot. And so I said, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. So I went back over there to the surge school where they held the Kit Carson training, and I think it was a 2-week long course, and I picked up a Kit Carson scout. The premise was that the Kit Carson scouts were former Viet Cong or North Vietnamese soldiers who surrendered over to the United States. And they, because of their skills and having been out in the field as part of the enemy, that they had some skills that they would be able to detect the enemy more rapidly than the GIs could. Came to find out, in reality, a good number of those guys were basically they were ARVN draft dodgers. ARVN being the South Vietnamese mm-hmm. Army. Mm-hmm. The life expectancy with the Americans was much longer than it would be if they had been drafted with the ARVNs. Plus, the Army paid better. The U.S. Army paid better than the ARVNs did. So these guys would lie and said they were true boys. And the guy that I got, he was worthless. And he just a young kid, Nguyen Han, and I took him. They put me in charge of all of us. They made us broke us up into squads, and one of the things we did was a field exercise, go out and basically run a little patrol around Camp Evans. And so they put me in charge. I said, okay, this will be a good deal. So I'll make him walk point and see what he's made of. And he spent the entire time looking over his shoulder, cussing me out. And I just, go.
How did you communicate with him?
It was pidgin English. Mm-hmm. They tried to teach us some Vietnamese as part of that. How much Vietnamese you can learn in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And Vietnamese is a very difficult language for us to learn, and English is somewhat difficult for the Vietnamese to learn because they don't have the same. We use different letter sounds or sounds to the alphabet than they do, and with the Vietnamese, most of their words are very short, 3, 4, or 5 letters, but a single word can have 5 different meanings depending on the inflection that's given to it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of their sound comes from the back of their throat. Like Nguyen is Nguyen, it comes out of their throat. We can't do that. Mm-hmm. They cannot pronounce S's and our R's, and but basically it was hand signs and pidgin English, and eventually try to get things. And we learned a few words of Vietnamese, but it was they learned the English a lot quicker than we learned the Vietnamese. Mm-hmm. But it was a struggle.
All right. So this guy basically wasn't really doing his job very well.
He was. When we got done, got done with the training, took him back to the company. And the first thing he wanted to do was go see a medic, because he claimed he got something wrong with his chest. He got shot or something, I guess, or he claimed he did. And he needed to have an operation to have this done. And he couldn't go out in the field because he had these health problems. And bull crap, you're going on out. And that was in July, so our B company was pulling some perimeter guard on the Firebase then. And Ripcord, and so we flew out. We flew. Matter of fact, the day that we flew out, there were 3 Kit Carson scouts and 3 GIs from our company that flew out there, and we were flying out there in a Huey, and we had like 50 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour headwinds coming through the mountains, and they were taking incoming at Ripcord, and we were flying out there. It was like being in a popcorn popper. We were just bouncing all over the place. And the Vietnamese guys were turning whiter than the GIs were, and we flew around for half hour, 45 minutes trying to get into Ripcord, and then the pilots couldn't do it. So finally they flew us over to Firebase O'Reilly, which the Arvins had that fire base, which wasn't too far from Ripcord, and they dropped us off there. And we spent the night there and we spent the night there, and the next day they were able to get us into Ripcord. So we went up on Ripcord, and again, first thing he wanted to do was see the medic, because he had this problem with his arm or shoulder or whatnot. And the medic went on, and again, lack of English and thinking, and the medic thought he had a rash, so he gave him some ointment. So he comes back and he chattering and whatnot, and he just, and
Now, about what date is it that you got in there here?
I was there, we got there, it was either a week or 10 days prior to the end of Ripcord. We were on there the last week or 10 days.
Okay,
that
so
we were on
around
the
July
Firebase.
15th or so.
Yeah, somewhere in that area.
Okay. All right. Now, then once you're on Ripcord, did you just stay on the base the rest of the time?
Yeah, we were in a position, position that I was actually in was below the VIP landing helipad. The Tactical Operations Center was on top of the fire base, and then there was a small landing helipad there, and we were down on the perimeter below that. Basically, we stayed there because there was incoming coming in. We were getting hundreds of rounds a day coming in, and so we just, for one's well-being, we stayed in our holes and didn't go anywhere. One night we had these little handheld radios that we could communicate with, basically within our platoon, and amongst several holes and whatnot. And we had the radio on, and the frequency was picking up Vietnamese, a whole bunch of Vietnamese chatter, and my scout started going nuts, and he was carrying on and whatnot. And this is probably like 9, 10 o'clock at night. It was already dark, and had no idea what it was, but it was just a constant stream of chatter on there, Vietnamese. And so I got on the radio and called to have one of our scouts, Ton, who spoke pretty good English, to have him come over to the hole so he could interpret for us. And he came over, and then one of the officers came with him, and the chatter was about they were massing forces. North Vietnamese were massing their forces to launch a ground attack that night. Well, so we went on strict alert. We were high alert. We didn't know where this was coming from, so obviously we thought they might be trying to attack us. But it turned out it was one of the other companies in the battalion that were getting hit. They were massing to hit that other company, and so that added on to Mr. Hahn's displeasure with being out on the field with the GIs.
All right. So now, during the night, were you still taking mortar rounds or rockets?
They wouldn't fire at night.
Okay.
Well, you don't want to fire at night because you can see the muzzle
Right,
flash,
right.
and you can find your location that much better. So it was very rarely that we got any incoming at night. And basically what we would do is, I think we had 4 guys in the position we were in, which was pretty good because you divide 4 by the middle of the night. For pulling guard duty, you got a little more, you got an extra hour or 2 of sleep. And I tried to explain to Han that he had to pull guard duty, and whenever it was his turn, I woke up in the middle of the night and he was sitting in the sleeping position, asleep in a corner, and what the heck? And I gave him a kick and dragged him outside and yapped at him, and he did his little squirrel chatter back at me, but he wouldn't pull. He didn't want to pull guard duty. He wanted to sleep, and we had another incident with him. Just at dusk, we would have rolls of concertina wire in front of the holes, and what we did was set it up so that it shaped a V. So if we had a sapper attack or ground attack, the wire would force the enemy to come towards your hole. Now, I was not fully ingrained in the military mindset. I thought it would be much better if you had the V kind of go that way, send them off someplace else rather than my hole. But that was I was overruled. But anyway, we would set this wire up every night, this roll, string this concertina wire up to get it stretched out. Well, once you roll and unroll and roll concertina wire, it starts getting kinked up, and it's a real pain in the butt, and it cuts the heck out of you. And I had him down there trying to help me, and he was standing there with his hands up, in his pocket, acting stupid. And I was telling him to grab the end of the wire, so no bick, which means I don't understand. And I'd probably just gotten flayed by a strand of barbed wire. And I took off my steel pot and I said, "No bick my butt," and I threw that thing and nailed him right in the chest. And I thought I killed the poor guy. But so that enhanced my relationships with the Vietnamese a good bit there also with him. But he just worthless.
Now, while you were there that last week or so on the base, did you come under direct ground attack, or was it just bombardment?
No, we never did. We just took incoming rockets and mortar attack.
Now, did you have, from your hole there, did you have much of a sense of what was going on or how the battle was going?
Well, I know it wasn't going good because we were on the receiving end. Then on the 18th of July, a Chinook helicopter came in to resupply the artillery battery up on top, and it got shot down. 51 caliber machine gun fire shot it down. It crashed and burned, and it burned up the artillery battery, all the guns and all their ammo. The fire spread down the hill to the infantrymen's ammo dump, and all of our stuff caught fire and burned up. And it was like being in the middle of a 4th of July celebration, up close and personal. And we went down to the northeast corner to get away from the explosions and the fire and stuff. The helicopter crashed, and the door gunner from the Chinook, he tried to jump out the window when it landed. The helicopter rolled and pinned him, and burned him alive underneath the helicopter. They tried to get him out, but the skin of the helicopter was made of titanium, and it burns. Titanium is flammable once you get it hot, and it burns very, very hot. And then with his flight suit, basically he cooked inside of his flight suit, and just a horrible way to go. And so anyway, we were down there, kind of on the northeast side, watching that, and we were on alert because we were very susceptible, obviously, with all that nonsense going on. And the unfortunate part was those on high figured that we were going to have a ground attack, so they brought in lots and lots of CS gas to repel ground attacks. Well, all that CS was in the ammo dump, and it caught fire. So there was this nice haze over the top of the Firebase, all this tear gas floating around. So of course we didn't have gas masks, and so it was a pleasant time was had by all. Then there was a fellow who was a replacement. Ripcord was used as a forward operating base for the battalion. So all the replacements for the other companies, the new guys coming in, they would come to Ripcord. Then they would get a helicopter ride from Ripcord to their unit out in the field. Well, there was a replacement guy just came on the Firebase, and he was in a position underneath, somewhere near where those ammo dumps were, and he panicked and got scared, and he went outside the wire and down around outside the perimeter of the hill to escape, the fire. And we were over doing our thing, and we were on some alert for a ground attack. Well, Andre Rice, who was with us in that spot, saw movement. Said, "There's movement. There's a guy out there, and there's rocks. And there's huge boulders. Boulders are like 10 feet high, 10, 20 feet across."
You can keep going.
And the Sergeant Rube, he said, he called up on top about what to do, and Rube said, go ahead and frag them. And so 5 or 6 of us started throwing frags at the fellow. And after a little while, we'd say, okay, stop. And after we stopped, he looked up and popped his head up and he said, stop, I'm an American. And it was a GI. Mm-hmm. So he came up and we did. Those of us throwing the grenades must not have done very well. At paid very good attention to hand grenade throwing school either, because all he ended up with was one wound in his leg, and he got up, and 2 of our guys went down there, and we had all this barbed wire and concertina wire on the perimeter, and I swear he took 3 steps and he was over the top of it and back inside the perimeter. And I said, well, that makes me feel real good.
All right. Now, before they take you off Ripcord, are there any other particular things that you observed or saw that kind of stick in your memory there?
Just probably the day that we evacuated, the 23rd, we decided to evacuate the Firebase. Again, they got ground word, I guess, through intelligence that we were they were getting ready to mass a ground attack. They were surrounding the Firebase and getting ready to mass a ground attack. And so that morning, they were, the 23rd, they were going to helicopter us out. So they started bringing, 5 o'clock in the morning, some guy, real early, they started bringing the helicopters out to haul stuff out. And then the Vietnamese started firing up the Chinooks because they were slow moving and whatnot. So then they were reduced to having only the Hueys come in. And they told the guys on the Firebase or on the perimeter to go around to fire suppressive fire with machine guns. Mm-hmm. So I was on a position underneath that VIP helipad and firing suppressive fire with an M60 as the helicopters coming in, and I could hear mortar tubes popping down in the valley from where the North Vietnamese were shooting their mortars from. So I was firing up that area with my M60, and I heard a voice over my shoulder. And I turned around and looked up, and it was Colonel Lucas, our battalion commander, and he's saying, son, you need to be firing your machine gun at that hilltop over there. They're firing mortars from the hilltop. And I said, sir, I can hear the tubes popping down the valley. So you can't fire mortars from down in the valley. You got to be on high elevation to fire at higher elevation. I said, whatever. And I thought to myself, what is this fool doing walking around on this helipad in the middle of all this junk flying? And why aren't you in the talk getting us the heck out of here? And evidently, found later on that was probably when he got killed. He's probably walking back, and then him and his XO were up on top there having a discussion out in the open on that helipad, and mortar got him. And so anyway, we continued doing my thing, and I had my scout with me. Han was with me, and he was hiding in the sleeping position. He wouldn't come out. And my machine gun either jammed or ran out of ammo, and I was reloading it. I don't remember which. And anyway, I was fumbling with the M60, and a mortar landed about 10 feet in front of my hole, and a piece of shrapnel about as big as the tip of my little finger hit me in the forehead. It went through my steel pot and lodged in my forehead, knocked me down into the bottom of the hole. And it was an instantaneous type thing. It's like I had been in a car wreck and having everything in slow motion. And my first sensation was, dang, my ribs hurt. Because I got bounced back against the back wall, and I had one of those steel poles shoring up the Firebase or the wall of the Firebase or the fighting position, and I bumped into that when I got hit. The concussion knocked me back, and then all of a sudden I heard this gush, and the blood started flowing down my face, and I said, "Oh crap!" And so I got my first aid bandage out of my pants, and I put that on there and put pressure on it. And then a young black guy, a new kid just come out to the company. He was from one of the other platoons. He came over from the next position over, asked if I was all right, because he saw the explosion right in front of my hole. And I said, no, I got hit. I said, I'm going to go find a medic. Would you watch Han here and take care of him, make sure he gets, he's taken care of. And he said, fine. So I took off, went looking for a medic. Well, the medics had all evacuated the Firebase by that point. in time. There were just us grunts were just left up there. So I went back in the position and got the bandage tied up and cleaned up a little bit, got the blood off my glasses so I could see, and hung around in the next position for a little bit, and then about a half hour later went up to the top of the hill to try to catch a helicopter ride out and get the heck out of there. And I was up on top, and the Pathfinder was calling in the helicopters, and I was up there waiting for him, waiting for him to get a helicopter in. And then Uwe Meyer came up to the top of the hill, and he screamed, "Rice has been hit. Come on down, get a stretcher and come on down, let's get him." Well, Andre Rice was coming up the trail on the side of the Firebase, and a mortar landed between his legs, blew him up, and tore him open. And so Rice, they ran down with a stretcher and got him. And his Rice his leg was torn open from his knee down to his boot top, and his belly was split open, and he had a hole in his jaw. And I talked to him, found him many years later, and talked to him. He's a friend of mine now, and we see him on occasion. And he said not only that, he had a broken right leg, a broken right arm, and a broken right shoulder. So he was there, and then eventually a helicopter came in, and it was not the medevacs. The medevacs weren't flying in anymore because it was too dangerous for them. And they threw Rice on the stretcher on the helicopter. I jumped on. They threw a bunch of excess weapons that were laying up there on there. Helicopter took off, and when we got outside of the range of Ripcord, the door gunner looked over and he saw Rice. Well, I had nice blood. Blood was all over the place on me, and then Rice was all tore up and split open. And his eyes got real wide, and I saw him push the microphone to his mouth and say something. And then the pilot, I saw out of the corner of my eye, the pilot turned around and looked, and he saw Rice, and the nose of the helicopter dropped, and it took off. That was the fastest ride back to Camp Evans. He flew us back, lickety-split. We flew back to the little hospital at Camp Evans. They took Rice off into there, put him on one of the tables. The generator had gone out, so they didn't have any power. And of course, with all the other companies and whatnot, all the casualties that the battalion took that day, the medical staff was overwhelmed. I was sitting there waiting, and he said, "Well, asked me what happened, how I was doing, and checked me out a little bit." And so, "Well, can you go back over to the aid station and let them, get you cleaned up and taken care of?" And I said, "Fine, do that." So I went over to the aid station, and they cleaned me up, bandaged me up, and cleaned out the wound and whatnot. I went back over to the company area. Then when I got over to the company area, the Vietnamese scouts came up to me, and they started yapping and carrying on. They said, "Where's Han? Where's Han?" I said, "How the hell do I know where he is? I got wounded and I left him behind." And so he was supposed to go with this other guy. And by that time, the Firebase had been evacuated, and Han was nowhere to be seen. And I saw the kid that I told to take care of him. I said, "Where's Han?" He said, "I tried to get him out of that fighting position. He wouldn't come out of the hole. He refused to come out." And I said, "Well," says, "so be it. He wasn't worth a crap anyway." So Vietnam claimed one of its own. And then again, 45 minutes later, an hour later, here he comes bebopping in down the road, and somebody had picked him up. They saw him running around on top of the Firebase, and they ascertained he was an American asset, not a North Vietnamese, and they picked him up and brought him in. He dodged the bullet on death there. So anyway, we had a stand down then back in the battalion area to get refitted and everything. I stayed back in the area a day or two, went back over to the aid station, and Doc Harris, the battalion surgeon, checked me out some more, and he sent me over to the hospital to get an x-ray, and he thought he saw a skull fracture. So he got kind of excited and said, we need to get you to the hospital down in Da Nang. And I said, "Oh, I got to go hitchhike a ride again?" He said, "Oh, no." He said, "Go over to this helipad over there, and they got like a bus run. They got Chinooks that fly back and forth between Da Nang and Camp Evans. So go catch a flight, and hook a ride over to the hospital in Da Nang." And So I did that, went over to Da Nang, spent 2 weeks in the hospital there. While I was there, I had a procedure done, an arteriogram. They stuck a needle in my neck and injected some dye into my carotid artery to see if there was any shrapnel went through my skull. And after I got discharged and said, well, you're good to go, you go back out to the field, which made me one sad puppy. I said, well, that's the second time I've been to the hospital. They told me to go out in the field. How many tries do I get at this? And so I went back to Camp Evans, and by the time I got back to Camp Evans, this injection site had gotten infected. Mm-hmm. So Doc Harris, again, he was feeling kind of, guilty about leaving me hanging around with when he thought I had a skull fracture. So he took real good care of me and made sure I was on profile and didn't have to do too much. So basically I hung around in the area. I was taking a lot of antibiotics again to get rid of the infections. And I went on R&R to Sydney, and then came back and eventually went back out in the field. But from September until when I left, I remember a lot of things that happened, but now as we know today from what's happened to the guys in Iraq and Afghanistan, basically what I had was TBI, traumatic brain injury, of course post-concussion syndrome, whatever. So my brain was addled, and I don't my whole, I remember things, but the time sequence is totally out of whack. I eventually did go back out in the field, didn't spend, a heck of a lot of time out there. We did an airlift into an area one day. We were having, it was an area that it was hotter and blazes, and they had the elephant grass that was 6-8 foot high, and we're getting cut up, walking through this junk, and all of a sudden I hear a pop. What the hell is that? Hold up. And Han, our infamous Kit Carson scout, he was tired of humping, and he shot himself in the foot to get out of the field. And Captain Peters was our company commander at that time, and he had a little sympathy for the Kit Carson scouts. He had little sympathy or little use, and he said, "That's fine." He said, "When we get to our site, we'll see if we can call a helicopter in to get him all dead." Made him march another click on his shot up foot, and so he finally departed. He got his wish and got out of the field, but he shot himself in the foot to get out of the field. That's what a high caliber individual he was. But
and in those last that period there when you were out there before you get to go home, was there less intense action than
there
before?
was little, very little. The only action that we ran a ridge line, and we were getting resupplied, and unbeknownst to us, there was a bunch of NVA on the next ridge line, and the humorous part of the incident was our supply sergeant, who was a rather pain in the butt character. He used to like to come out and throw all the supplies and stuff out, and he thought that he was hot stuff riding around the helicopter and doing that kind of stuff. Well, the North Vietnamese fired an RPG and took out the nose of the helicopter, and Horst came onto that helicopter at a 90-degree angle. He's just shot like he was shot out of there, and one of the pilot or the co-pilot got mangled pretty bad. He got his legs mangled up pretty bad. Well, eventually the helicopter kind of wobbled and took off, and Horst was laying there, out on the helipad, and I said, "Horst, how nice of you to visit. You're gonna spend the night with the boys, do a little camping out with us. And no weapon, no gear, no steel pot or anything. Now I can see what those boys go through at night." But I think he eventually got out that night. But he was real anxious to get back to Camp Evans. But that was the only contact we had. And I had at some point I had gotten in problem with a lot of boils. I had about 14, 15 boils on my backside, and went up to Rakkasan, Firebase Rakkasan, the aid station was up there, and I got treated for that for about a week. So I wasn't. And then at that time, the military pay currency was being changed over, and I kept missing the pay officer. So I eventually had to go back to the Camp Eagle to get to the finance office to get my money exchanged before it expired. And when I went back to the company area, then the first sergeant met me and he chewed me out for going behind his back and securing a rear job. And I said, what are you talking about? I know nothing about a rear job. But somebody had put me in, and I worked the last few weeks as a radio operator in the battalion talk. And then Dick Nixon did his bit to win the war, and he shortened our tours. He shortened our tours by 25 days at that time. So my tour got shortened by 25 days, and I headed on home.
Okay. Now you still had, this is sort of now the end of the year in 1970?
This was in November.
Okay.
So I spent 11 months and 5 days in Vietnam.
All right. Now you still got another 6 months left
6 months in the Army.
in your enlistment. So what do you do in that last period?
The last 6 months I was assigned down to Fort Hood, and I was eventually assigned to an infantry company with the 1st Armored Division. And it was a terrible situation. Fort Hood is a large fort, two full divisions on the fort. The vast majority of like in the infantry companies, the vast majority of the cadre, the people assigned to the infantry companies were guys who had just been to Vietnam. They had 6 months of service left. Draftees, they weren't making it a career. They didn't want to be there. They didn't want to do nothing with the Army. The Army didn't want nothing to do with them. And there was a lot of racial crap going on back then. And they would, a lot of make-do. I think the first month I was assigned to the company, I think we went on a sweep of the company area about 5 times a day, picking up cigarette butts. That was the highlight of the activity. When I was there, after I was there, I was in that company for maybe a month or so, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and the company clerk was getting out of the Army, and I got called in to talk to the first sergeant and asked me if I could type. And I said, yeah, I know how to type. He said, oh, okay, you're the company clerk. And so they made me a company clerk. So that turned out pretty good, because I had an 8 to 5 job, or 8 to 5 o'clock job, and my weekends were off. I didn't pull KP or guard duty or anything else. I typed up the list and I put somebody else's name on there. I wasn't going to put my name on there. And so that was pretty good, other than just having to put up with the nonsense of being on the cadre.
Right. Now you mentioned you were starting to get racial problems and things on the base. How did those manifest themselves?
One night I went downtown. I don't know if I went to a movie or something, but I went off base and I came back, and in our company area, all the black guys were in front of one barracks, and all the white guys were in front of another. And they were just massing, just short of conflict, physical conflict. And I don't know what precipitated it. The brigade commander got rousted out of bed. It was 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. And he came in with a bunch of MPs to try to calm things down. Now, the local lore at Fort Hood was that whatever the street number, 19th Street or 69th Street or whatever it was off limits to the MPs after dark. Because it was such a rough area. What kind of nonsense is this? And the way that the physical setup of the company was, we had the street out front, and then they had the orderly room off that street, and there was kind of like an alley or whatever, and then you had the barracks behind that alley. Then there was another road back behind the barracks, which we never went in that direction. Well, one day I happened to go out, all walking around and whatnot, went behind the barracks, and that was the magic street, 69th Street, 19th Street, or whatever. I said, dang, I'm living on this road that's off limits to the MPs. So this is a real nice place to be. So when things got real dicey, like that night, I turned back around, and there was one of the other clerks was renting a trailer downtown. I went and stayed in the trailer. I had gotten my Purple Heart in Vietnam. I didn't need to try and get one at Fort Hood, Texas, through nonsense.
Now, did you notice much by way of racial tension when you were actually in Vietnam?
There was in the rear. There wasn't any. You didn't have time for that in the field. I didn't notice it out in the field, but in the rear there was that was noticeable. That when I was working at the talk, it seemed like the line getting into the mess hall was a flashpoint. And you would have, it seemed like, like 2 or 3 black guys would be at the front of the line, and then you'd have a bunch of white guys, and then all of a sudden you'd have a herd of 30 black guys, and they would jump the line. So that caused a lot of jawing and whatnot going on. Personally, I got along with everybody. I'll sit down and shoot the bull with anybody, and I got along with people most everywhere. But I did not have any personal conflict, but there was that, and there was, I worked from 8 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock in the morning in the talk, and when I walked over to the talk, there was an area that was kind of weeded, overgrown area, and guys were in there, and you knew they were doing dope down in there, smoking dope.
Now, was drug use also kind of a rear area thing?
Yeah. The only time I saw drugs out in the field was when I was up on Firebase Ripcord. They had a bunker that was set aside for guys that were transient coming through, and me and 2 other guys from the company were in there, and there was a bunch of clothes and junk in one corner of that bunker. And one of the guys, he went through there and started sorting through the stuff, and he pulled up a plastic bag full of vegetable product. And he said, "Oh, guys all got all wide, and like he found a nice gold cachet of some sort." And I said, "What the hell is that?" And he said, "That's marijuana." And that was my first time I ever saw marijuana. Didn't know what to do with it, and I was like, "Oh my God, get me away from that stuff."
All right. Now you get to the end of your time in the service. Then you get discharged in 71. What do you do when you get out?
Went back home. My intention was to collect unemployment the rest of the summer. Then I was going back to school. I'm going to go to school at the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. I went back to the paper mill that I was working at when I got drafted, and because by law they had to hire me back. And I told them, I went to the personnel office, talked to them, and said, "I'm going back to school, so I'm not going to work here full time. So, well, we're not going to hire you, as a summer help." So I said, "Fine." So I went back home. I collected one unemployment check. Green Bay Packaging got the bill for their part of paying my unemployment, and they called me up and said, "Come to work Monday." So I worked for a month back in that paper mill, mind-numbing place. And I made a promise to myself at that point, if I ever work in a paper mill again, I'm going to be the owner of it. I'm never going to work on the floor of a paper mill again. Which added incentive to me when I went back to school to do it right the second time. And I went to school at UW Stevens Point, got my degree there eventually.
And then what did you wind up doing then for a living?
After, when I was up there at Point, I met a local girl, married her the year after I graduated from college. A year after that, I got hired by the Defense Department as an investigator. And I spent 29 years as an investigator with the federal government. Eventually started out in Milwaukee, was in Milwaukee for 4 years as an investigator, went to Baltimore, our investigation center, working as a case analyst, got promoted to a supervisory position, was there for 2 years, went to Fayetteville, North Carolina, was an assistant special agent in charge for, I think, 3 years in Fayetteville. And then got promoted to special agent in charge of the Columbia, South Carolina field office, and was special agent in charge for 20 years, and retired.
Yeah, and if we had more time, we'd go find out more about what you investigate. But in the meantime, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to share your story with us.
Okay, great.
All right, and yeah, he got killed almost.